In the dark, black depths of the ocean, 13,000 feet below, scientists have found something that has raised questions about our very existence. Something that should not have been at such a depth. Yet, its presence has given us a major warning. Just a month ago, we heard a lot of news about deep-sea creatures coming out of the ocean in large numbers. Could this have been the reason behind it? One day in 2013, deep-sea scientist Andrew Sweetman and his team wanted to investigate the health of deep-sea creatures. They sensed that deep-sea creatures in this particular area could be facing significant danger in the Clarion-Clipperton Zone, or CCZ, which lies in the Pacific Ocean between Hawaii and Mexico. Now, why is there a danger? I'll tell you about that in just a moment. But with this very thought, Andrew Sweetman sent his special machine, the automated seafloor lander, 5,000 meters down into the ocean in this area. As soon as the lander reached the bottom, its mouth opened and it began to draw in the deep water into a special chamber which is called the benthic chamber. Basically, it's a tank that captures deep water inside itself, isolates it, and then studies it using the sensors installed within. Through this, they wanted to find out how quickly the amount of oxygen decreases in such deep waters of the ocean. Because as we've been taught, 80% of oxygen production happens at the surface of the ocean by plants, algae, phytoplankton and some bacteria through the process of photosynthesis. And then this very oxygen dissolves and goes down into the deeper layers of the ocean, which keeps marine life alive. That means the amount of oxygen gradually decreases as you go deeper into the ocean layers, because naturally, all the fish at the surface use it up. But in the course of this very research, what Andrew Sweetman observed was truly strange. Instead of the oxygen levels decreasing, they were actually increasing rapidly with depth. Despite all the fish using up the oxygen, it wasn't decreasing in fact, it was increasing even more. In some areas, they even found more oxygen in the deep sea than at the surface. This observation was so weird that Andrew and his team couldn't believe it at first. They had to test again using different measurement equipment. And finally, they confirmed that yes, there is something in the dark depths of the ocean that is producing this unknown oxygen. They named it dark oxygen. But how exactly was this dark oxygen being produced? And how had it remained hidden from us until now? Are the strange and giant creatures of the deep sea dependent on this dark oxygen? Did dark oxygen play any role in the evolution of their lives? All these questions started troubling Andrew. And then Andrew noticed a very interesting observation. Do you remember, at the beginning I mentioned that Andrew was worried that deep-sea creatures might be in danger? What was the reason after all? Because this Clarion-Clipperton Zone is a very famous area specifically for deep-sea mining. It's literally a money-printing machine for billionaires. Because according to research, just in this single area, there are trillions of dollars worth of metals and minerals present. If you evaluate that in numbers, the figure comes to around 16 to 17 trillion dollars. Just imagine, there are trillions of dollars worth of metals and minerals present here, among which the most in-demand metals are manganese, nickel and cobalt, and about 75 to 85% of these come from just this one source. And that source is these small potato-shaped stones called polymetallic nodules. These stones are so rare that it takes millions of years to form them. Obviously, they are created by nature. During this process, metals and minerals are slowly deposited in them layer by layer. And the interesting thing is that these very stones are spread across 9 million square kilometers of the seafloor in this area, with a total quantity of about 2,100 crore 21 billion tons. Could it be that a clue to dark oxygen was hidden within these very stones? This is exactly the question that came to Andrew and his team. But who could possibly answer this question?
Only one person, the king of ocean chemistry and Andrew's former colleague, Dr. Franz Geiger.
After meeting with Dr. Geiger, the two scientists decided that they should test this unique stone in their lab by recreating an environment exactly like the one at the bottom of the ocean. This way we would be able to closely observe the behavior of these stones, and the separation of oxygen and water would happen right before our eyes. And that's why they immediately brought those same polymetallic nodules from the ocean floor. They disinfected it with mercury chloride so that if there were any oxygen-producing bacteria sitting on it that were actually producing oxygen, they could be eliminated. And finally, they placed it underwater in an airtight jar, recreating the exact cold and salty water environment. and began tracking the oxygen levels. And exactly the same thing happened as was occurring in the deep sea. Instead of decreasing, the oxygen level in that jar started to increase, and it rose to 3 times the normal level. This at least proved that the source of this newly formed oxygen gas was definitely not any plant or microorganism. The source of this oxygen is not biotic, but abiotic. So then, what exactly was happening? How was a rough black stone managing to release oxygen? Well, now all that was needed was one final experiment, which would finally confirm Dr. Geiger's suspicion. But it was not going to be that easy for the esteemed Dr. Geiger, because some incredibly powerful and influential people who stood to make literally billions of dollars were relentlessly and aggressively after these 2 brilliant scientists. Let's pause the story here for a moment because I want to ask you a question. Look, oxygen, the gas that is literally our life, you could even call it our soul. Was it because of this gas that we were born? Or did life on Earth, that is, plants, give birth to oxygen? So, did oxygen give birth to life, or did life give birth to oxygen? Kind of like the chicken and egg question, right? You'd be really surprised to hear this. The Earth was formed 4.5 billion years ago, right? Life on Earth first originated between 3.8 and 4.1 billion years ago. But do you know how much oxygen there was on Earth just 2.4 billion years ago? 0.001%. And how much is it today? 21%. And you see, it's because of this that living beings like us can breathe today and we are alive. So the question is, what exactly happened on Earth 2.4 billion years ago that it was as if an oxygen bomb exploded? Just imagine, the Earth 2.7 billion years ago looked just like an alien planet. A thick orange sky filled with methane and carbon dioxide with no oxygen. Seas loaded with sulfur and iron, on whose surface a few bacteria and microorganisms are thriving, feasting on this chemical waste. Among these creatures grazing on chemical waste, a hero is born known that will change the very fate of Earth: cyanobacteria. Cyanobacteria acquired a genetic mutation that gave it the remarkable ability to use sunlight and water to produce energy, a process we now know as photosynthesis. But in this very process, it began to release oxygen gas as waste that would go on to change both the course and the nature of life on Earth. These organisms began to multiply rapidly on Earth, reaching billions in number. The amount of oxygen kept increasing. It was as if every inch of Earth's land and oceans was exhaling oxygen. As a result, the other organisms that survived on different chemicals started to die off. Because oxygen gas was poisonous, toxic for them. Because oxygen is extremely reactive. But these changing conditions and environment gave birth to a new kind of organism for whom this toxic oxygen was like nectar. The birth of our microscopic ancestors had taken place, who then, under the very shelter of this oxygen, gas literally under its shelter, because oxygen gas also formed the ozone layer in the atmosphere above, multiplied and evolved rapidly under its protection. In all those forms and colors that we see today, scientists have called this event the Great Oxidation Event. And it was only after this that Earth became the planet we now call home. But now comes a twist in the story. The discovery of this new dark oxygen contradicts that, right? Because oxygen was already present on Earth, at least in the deeper layers of water. In fact, even today, many studies have shown that there are 5,000 to 6,000 species in the Clarion-Clipperton Zone that survive only in this region. 88 to 92% of those species crawl along the seafloor here. But for us, they are completely unknown and undescribed, and all of them are dependent on this dark oxygen. How do we know this? Well, in the 1980s, some excavation was done in this area just to test, and the entire ecosystem was devastated. 70 to 80% of the organisms were wiped out to such an extent that even after 45 years, they still haven't recovered. We tend to think that the entire deep sea is just one single ecosystem. But thinking like that is a huge mistake. It's like saying that because I live in Mumbai, the whole world must be like Mumbai. In India, you find Bengal tigers. In Australia, you find kangaroos and ostriches. And in the Arctic, there are polar bears. But the deep sea has even more diversity than that. Here, in each trench, that is, in the deep underwater canyons, there are different species that have evolved specifically for that unique world. You might not believe it, but when a blue whale dies at the surface, as its 150-ton carcass sinks down, thousands of creatures feast on it. And not just for a day, but for up to 50 years. First, large predators like hagfish and sharks feast on its meat. Then scavengers like crustaceans and mollusks eat the remaining flesh. After that, worms take over everything. But in the end, whatever bones, fat, and decayed matter are left, those are fed upon for generations to come. Chemical-eating bacteria multiply, producing large amounts of hydrogen sulfide gas. This is called the sulfophilic stage, and the gas is hydrogen sulfide. As you know, this is excellent food for deep-sea microbes, which are then eaten by tube worms, and those in turn are eaten by squids and fish. And this cycle keeps going on. What a disgusting kind of beauty nature has, right? Did you know there are also poisonous ponds in the deep sea? Well, poisonous for us, of course. For many creatures, though, that's their home, their world. These are called cold seeps or brine pools. Now, ponds inside the ocean, that's strange, right? That's because they're made of brine, which is extremely salty water. 5 to 6 times more salty than seawater, and brine is so dense that even water sinks in it because its density is higher. And since there's no oxygen here and it's packed with methane, other gases and minerals, these are poisonous for many animals as well. But this very poison is food for many bacteria, which in turn attract many shellfish to this pool, and then crabs, shrimps and fish feed on those shellfish, and even sharks. This is a typical example of how even a small ecosystem connects to a larger food chain on which the lives of many creatures depend, sometimes for decades or even centuries. And now, if we talk about polymetallic nodules, which produce this very dark oxygen and create a large ecosystem, the mining operations of the 1980s have already proven this by destroying 70 to 80% of the organisms and their ecosystems damage that still hasn't recovered even after 45 years. But the unfortunate thing is that even after so much clear evidence, a powerful lobby has emerged that is openly denying it. For example, the metals company TMC. You know what the most ironic thing is? It was this very TMC company that had scientists conduct the initial research on the deep sea. But when the bitter truth came out, they tried their best to suppress it completely. TMC called the findings of those two scientists flawed and misleading, and even started blaming the journal Nature Geoscience, which is a proper peer-reviewed scientific journal. Are dollars more important to these billionaires and companies than the fragile lungs of the ocean? Well, there was only one way to stop them, and that was in the hands of these two scientists. So by now, both scientists, Andrew Sweetman and Dr. Franz Geiger, had already proven through their lab experiments that metallic nodules do indeed release oxygen gas. But what they still needed to prove was the exact mechanism behind it, by which mechanism is dark oxygen being produced. So how do these two scientists actually manage to do this? Well, Dr. Franz remembered that a long time ago, he had once proven through a lab experiment that seawater, under certain conditions, can interact with rusted metals to generate electricity. Yes, just like an underwater battery. Under the right conditions, this can create a simple type of reaction, the kind we even learned about in our childhood. A reaction that can split water that is H2O into two parts. Hydrogen and oxygen? I'm talking about electrolysis. So could these underwater polymetallic nodules also be releasing oxygen through this very reaction? Are there billions of underwater batteries hidden in the dark depths of the ocean that are producing this dark oxygen? Sounds weird, right? Well, it was very important to test this. So once again, both scientists brought samples of these rocks to the lab and placed them in salty water that mimicked the deep sea environment. But this time, they attached two electrodes to the surface of those rocks and measured it with a voltmeter. And they were shocked. I mean, both emotionally and literally, because 0.95 volts of electricity was actually produced. But how is that even possible? Well, let me quickly give you a short revision of the physics concept. Then it'll be more fun. Look, what does it mean to have 0.95 volts of electricity, and that too from a rock? So, the simple principle of electricity is that it always flows from high potential to low potential. This is basically a universal principle that applies throughout the universe. For example, imagine you take a pipe and fill it with water. Will the water in this pipe move forward on its own? No, right? But if you take one end of the pipe and lift it up, then suddenly a force will be created in the water inside the pipe that will push it forward. Well, electricity works in exactly the same way. Lifting the pipe is like creating a potential difference. and the flow of water is the force that moves the charge forward, which we measure in volts. So a AA battery, which is also called a 1.5 volt battery, has a potential difference of 1.5 volts between the positive and negative terminals, and to cover that difference, the charge travels from the side where it is in greater quantity to the side where it is less, with a force of 1.5 volts. And if you insert any circuit in between, like a bulb for example, the charge will pass through that circuit and reach the negative terminal, and the bulb will light up. Now in this polymetallic nodule, if you look closely, manganese is already present, which is exactly what we use in our batteries and which also creates the positive terminal in batteries. The only thing is, unlike batteries, these don't contain zinc. But in its place, there's iron oxide, which plays the role of the negative terminal, and the rest of the medium, which we call the electrolyte, is actually seawater itself, filled with ions like Na+, Cl, H2+, and OH. And that's why when the scientists placed one electrode at one point on its surface and another at a different point, the voltmeter showed a reading of 0.95 volts of electricity. This was completely shocking for both scientists because they hadn't expected anything in the millivolt range at all. In fact, they had expected the electricity to come out in nanovolts, so the amount of electricity produced was much higher than expected. Now, if these rocks are actually producing electricity, does that simply mean that the process of electrolysis is happening deep in the ocean, producing a lot of dark oxygen? Well, there is a catch. Both scientists agreed that for the process of electrolysis to take place, at least 1.23 volts of electricity would be required. But we only got 0.95 volts, which they addressed in their research paper by stating that these stones can definitely produce 1.23 volts as well if they are found together in larger numbers or in a clustered form, which is quite common in a deep water landscape. For example, just two stones together can produce 1.9 volts. Now, in 2023, this research was properly validated. Statistical data also confirmed which voltage is consistently linked to oxygen production. And finally, in 2024, the study was published in the peer-reviewed scientific journal Nature Geoscience because the evidence was truly quite convincing. However, on September 2024, the metals company issued an unusually lengthy response, challenging the discovery as completely flawed and included a large amount of raw data and research notes. They claim that they have spent $75 million and have been funding research for 12 years to mine in an honest and sustainable way so that minerals can be extracted to produce clean energy. But how much can this company's statements really be trusted? Isn't this just like the cat claiming to be the most honest guardian of the milk? Their conflict of interest is clearly visible. But in this matter, the CORC, that is the Critical Oil Minerals Research Center, also got involved, and they called this discovery a yellow flag. Because they said that two other researchers had already conducted the same experiment before, but they didn't get such results. For example, the University of Southern Denmark conducted a similar research, but using a different type of lander, a variant lander. They actually got the opposite result. Instead of oxygen increasing, it was actually decreasing. Now, Andrew and his team's response to this was that the variant lander cannot measure the results as accurately. But some other genuine scientists and researchers have also raised concerns. For example, Bo Bakker-Jørgensen, an independent researcher from Aarhus University, found completely opposite results just 2 months ago, and in an interview with a magazine, he said that there were some methodological flaws in Shwetaman's research. For instance, in the number 1 lab experiment, we didn't even replicate the pressure that's 400 times greater in the deep sea, which according to Andrew is irrelevant to the end result. Or take number 2, exactly how 0.95 to 1.23 volts are being generated is quite speculative, and no clear-cut mechanism for this has been proven. And number 3, in the research, hydrogen gas was also not measured accurately because if H2O is being split through electrolysis, then hydrogen gas should also be released along with oxygen. So, is the amount of hydrogen gas increasing? So all in all, according to Jorgensen, this research has raised more questions than it has provided answers, and it has made us realize just how little we still know about the ocean. So has it been proven that Andrew and his team's research is wrong? Well, absolutely not. In fact, now the game has started to pick up pace even faster because Andrew's research received more support than criticism. Look, whenever there's a major new discovery in science, massive debates always break out, and that's the beauty of science, because it pushes us to run even faster, with precision and caution, to determine the truth. Repeatability is extremely important in science, which is why many scientists themselves are now performing such experiments to observe and experience the results firsthand. But as of now, that is June 2025, the good news is that despite heavy pressure from mining companies, the spending of millions of rupees and lobbying, most deep marine scientists and their confidence have led 33 countries to support either a ban or at least a temporary hold on deep sea mining. And that's why the International Union for Conservation of Nature, a global authority, has imposed a temporary hold on deep sea mining until we fully understand all the risks associated with it. But the truly bitter truth is that deep sea mining is just a very small trailer of our profound human negligence. Take a look at this area. Its size is as vast as two Pakistans. But this isn't land, it's actually a heap of garbage. Yes, a pile of garbage in the middle of the Pacific Ocean as vast as two Pakistans or three Rajasthans. And this is just the main heap, where the trash is extremely concentrated in the water, and in some areas it's even solidly packed. But if you count its soft edges as well, this area forms a patch even bigger than India. A 2014 study revealed that there are at least 5.25 trillion pieces of plastic here, with a total weight of 269,000 tons. And you won't believe it, but it's because of just this one patch. Every year, 1 million seabirds and 100,000 marine mammals die there by eating something poisonous, getting trapped in piles of plastic, or getting caught in stray nylon fishing nets here. And the most concerning thing is that this isn't the only garbage patch in the world. In fact, take a look, there are at least 5 major garbage patches like this in the world, and who knows how many minor patches there might be. Listen, let me tell you a story about a retired naval officer and researcher, Victor Vescovo. During his 5 Deeps expedition, he set out to reach the deepest points of all 5 oceans, and as soon as he got there, he was greeted by plastic bags and wrappers.
But as I continued going along the bottom, cruising around, I did see what appeared to be 1 or 2 particles of man-made matter, and one of them had a letter on it printed.
Just imagine, plastic is reaching even 11 kilometers below the surface, deep inside a trench. Now, the biggest problem is that this plastic will never go away, it will never be naturally destroyed. It will just keep accumulating for centuries, which is toxic for fish and their ecosystem. Let me tell you why. The way we are being careless, According to several reports, by 2040, the amount of plastic in the oceans will triple. That means there will be more plastic than fish in the ocean. Just imagine, and this is just about macro or large size plastic, which means that microplastics in the ocean will multiply even faster. According to a 2017 study, today 71% of seabirds and 30% of turtles have plastic and microplastics in their stomachs, and 50% of these animals die from suffocation because of it. A study by Portland University even found traces of microplastics in 99% of the fish that Americans were eating. And another research found these same microplastics in 100% of the fish samples. Today, because of this, the situation has become such that the average person is consuming between 78,000 to 211,000 microplastic particles every year through food and drink. You won't believe it. When a research study from the University of New Mexico examined 51 brain samples, it was discovered every single brain sample contained more plastic than a credit card. That's 0.5% of the brain's mass, which comes out to 6 to 7 grams of pure plastic. That's about as much as a credit card just inside your brain. Imagine how much there must be in your lungs, kidneys, and other organs. Microplastics are even being found in the placentas of newborn babies. Just think about how this might be affecting children's growth and development. Human civilization today is literally racing ahead at the speed of a horse, while the regulations meant to protect our environment are being written even slower than a turtle's pace. Debates go on for years, and only when it's too late and things have gotten out of hand are those regulations finally implemented. We humans have become the greatest enemies of nature itself, the very nature that gave us birth. This dark reality has been brought to light by the discovery of this dark oxygen. To conduct deeper and more rigorous research on this subject, Andrew and his team have received a £2 million grant from Japan's Nippon Foundation. This research, which started in 2025, will continue for another 3 years, and next year, that is in 2026, it will send its equipment 11,000 meters below the sea and study those samples as well. Their major goals would be, number 1, to reproduce their original discovery. That means if their findings remain consistent here as well, it will be a very positive sign. Number 2, this time they will also carefully measure hydrogen levels. Because in the electrolysis process, not only oxygen, but hydrogen gas is also released. Number 3, They will check whether this newly produced hydrogen is also essential for the survival of deep water creatures. And number 4, they will also examine whether microorganisms might play a major role in producing this dark oxygen, or if the source of this oxygen is purely abiotic, meaning independent of life. Now just think about what profound implications this research could have. I mean, we've always believed that life depends on photosynthesis for oxygen, which requires both liquid oceans and the sun. And that's why, with space telescopes like Kepler, we specifically target those planets that, like Earth, are in the Goldilocks zone of their star. That is, at almost the same ideal distance from their star as Earth is from the sun. But if it is proven beyond a doubt that dark oxygen is a major source of oxygen in the deep sea, capable of producing oxygen without life or photosynthesis, then should we really limit our search for alien life only to planets in the Goldilocks zones? Is the presence of liquid oceans and a sun even a necessary criterion? I mean, what does life really need? Water, energy, and chemistry. Water can be found in liquid form, even in the deep layers of frozen oceans. Energy is produced even in the depths of frozen worlds through the extreme heat of hydrothermal vents. Most scientists agree that it was through these vents that life originated on Earth, as well not from the sun's energy and finally, the right chemistry. Now, the discovery of dark oxygen in the deep sea further supports the presence of the right chemistry because oxygen accelerates the evolution of life. What's interesting is that even on Earth, the sun played a very minor role in the origin of life. All the right biological molecules such as nucleic acids like RNA, lipids, and amino acids were actually formed deep under the ocean, several kilometers below the surface, away from the sun's influence. So are the deep seas themselves capable of producing and evolving life? Dark oxygen is a crucial link in answering all these questions. But until then, we humans must prevent our own future from being ruined by our greed and carelessness. Do share this video with your friends and families, and see you very soon.